Hello, my name is Chip Hare. I'm the Athletic Director for Piqua City Schools, and today we're providing a very special program for our veterans, and veterans in particular, and honoring them. And also bringing to light a very important issue of PTSD. I'd like to introduce you to a couple of people who are going to make this program as special as it is, starting with our veteran here, John Looker, and our student Trenton Rudd. Gentlemen, could you just go ahead and introduce yourselves
Yeah, so my name is Trenton Rudd. I'm a senior at Piqua High School and I'm a student athlete.
My name is John Looker, and I was in the Army, U.S. Army, with the 1st Cav from 1967 to 1969, and I spent 1968 and 1969 in Vietnam and received my last Purple Heart on March the 9th, 1969.
John, thank you. First of all, thank you for your service, and thank you for being with us today. Trenton, I'm going to start with you because this whole thing started with you coming to my office and saying, "Hey, I have a special project that I need to do for my service learning class. However, I want it to be more than just a project."
Yeah, so for my final for my service learning class was to create a project to help out my community. And my first thought was, how can I help out my veterans? So I'm thinking to myself, well, let's do some research first. So I found out that the transition from a life in service to a traditional lifestyle is very difficult for them. I did some more digging, I found out that PTSD is a leading cause and why it can be difficult. So I came to, of course, you, Mr. Hare, and said, how can I help out but without athletics? And you said, how about we do a t-shirt drive? And I thought that was a great idea to start out. So what we did was found some sponsors to help fund for the t-shirts. And so what we're doing is to help spread awareness and raise some money is we are selling t-shirts for a basketball game on February 10th. It will be Piqua versus Troy. And so the organization that we'll be giving to is called Save a Warrior. And they're a rehabilitation group out of Columbus. So the reason that I started off doing this is because my grandpa, he was in Vietnam, and I could always just tell that he was not that he wasn't here, but there's other things bothering him in his mind. So that's kind of started off with why I wanted to do PTSD, and then I found out it's a bigger problem than what people realize. So it really snowballed more than what I think. It really snowballed more than what I think could have happened. Mm-hmm. So, but now we're here, and it's great.
Trenton, I think when you came to me, it was, hey, here's this idea. Let's see if there's any interest in the community to help support this. Yeah. So we took and thought that our final regular home season basketball game when Piqua hosts Troy, which is always a big game anytime those two schools get after it in any sport, we felt it would be a good opportunity to bring to light that and put it on stage, put the spotlight, so to speak, on that topic, but moreover our veterans. And as we went out to try to get some sponsorships, and you were calling these particular organizations, you found that there was an outpouring support, not just in the number of dollars that they were willing to give out, but the fact that there were a lot of sponsorships. So you went from 10 to 12, and we're at 25 sponsors at $500 on the back of a shirt.
Yes, it's not only the money that we raised, but we went to the Piqua Legion and Miami Valley Museum for Veterans, and just listening to those veterans and talking to those veterans, it really opened me up on what this means to them, and it meant more the more I knew that this really is happening and is really affecting people.
John, I think, for Trenton, listening to him right now, but also him telling me through the last couple of weeks, what he's been touched by is when he's gone to the different veteran meetings within our city and our county and even the Miami Valley. He's been to 3 different ones. The impact that he sees that the veterans appreciate the fact that people that are as young as Trenton and his friends and colleagues take important fact that this is important to them. It's got to be touching from a veteran like yourself as well.
It is very, because most of the communities feel that the high school students are playing games all the time, or doing this or that. And for someone to get involved with a project like this is near and dear to my heart.
Well, let's talk a little about you, and then we'll get back to the game here at the end of this show. Because really, the reason we're doing this, and Trent wanted to do this, was to help people like yourself who have been through these scenarios. And PTSD is it's not a topic that people typically walk around and talk about.
Right.
It's very private to them. There's some shame and embarrassment sometimes that they're going through this. Little things such as flashing lights, backpacks of students that are walking down the hallway or in a mall area. Those can all be things that bring
Trigger.
something and trigger the things that aren't good. So if you wouldn't mind, first of all, tell us, you told us where branches you were in 1968, 69 you were in Vietnam. Talk a little bit about what Vietnam was like at that time. I mean, that's a long time ago. That was even a little bit before I was born. Trying to make myself feel
There
better.
you go.
But that was a time where it wasn't a war that we typically embraced as a country. And when you came back, it wasn't typically you were opened with open arms, because it was a war that people just didn't want to talk about.
Well, and the war was televised, so you could see everything sitting in your living room at home. And people took what they thought of that as being something that shouldn't be happening, was actually the way Vietnam was. Depending on what type of season you were in, it was either hot, or when we were in the mountains, it was very cold. When we were in our raining season, you'd freeze to death. In the 1st Cav is a unit that transports warriors or infantrymen from one firefight to another. So we were out in the field usually 30 to 45 days. And during that time, we rarely got a hot meal. They might drop one into us every couple of weeks or so. Not only that, but we didn't get new socks, and your socks would be soaking wet. And we didn't get new clothes, so we were pretty grimy throughout until we got back to a landing zone where we could actually get some fresh stuff.
How many days would you go sometimes without changing clothes? What were stretches like?
It could be 30 days, it could be 20 days, and it could be 45 days.
Wow.
Because we were in the field from 30 to 45 days before we'd come into a landing zone. And when we got there, we were able to actually get some hot meals. We were able to actually sleep in a bunker instead of on the ground. And the only thing that bad about it was we had to pull out outside perimeter. So one of them that comes to mind very frequently to me is they set us down in a bunker that was right next to the trash.
Oh.
So these big rats are running all over the place. And my friend Earl even had one run up his pants legs. So you didn't actually leave your pant legs open when you slept there. But we would stay there from anywhere 3 to 5 days and then back out into the field. But the conditions over there, it was pretty rough. I mean, you'd be carrying a 70-pound pack and all ammunition and stuff, and walking. Usually they'd set us down from the helicopters about 1,000 meters from wherever the firefight was going on. So you'd have to hump over to the firefight, do the firefight, and there was some times that we might even do 2 a day, which you never get a chance to just relax. You're 24/7 the entire time you're there.
John, the history books say, any movies that you've watched, documentaries about Vietnam, there are a lot of opinions out there about why that war should or shouldn't have happened. That's not what we're here to talk about today. However, what we are here to talk about is the after effects, particularly that war and that our veterans currently that are in current war conditions overseas battle. Tell us about your particular story. You and I shared about that a little bit ago, and it was just absolutely interesting for the right reasons, but it's also interesting for a lot of challenging reasons. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we can talk more about some of those after effects.
Well, when I first got in country, it was right after the Tet Offensive, and came into Cam Ranh Bay. First night I was in country, they hit the ammo dump at Cam Ranh Bay. So it was like the 4th of July all night long. A couple days later, we went out into the field, and we had our first conflict, bad conflict, on Mother's Day. And that was in 1968. And there was 4 killed that particular day out of our unit, which is usually about 26. And went from there, and you kind of get hardcore. You're in firefight almost every day, so you kind of get hardcore, but you still want to be next to somebody that's going to protect you, and next to somebody that's going to have your back. And Billy Bayham and Earl Longstreth were the 2 I was with over there. The next one that causes me a lot of nightmares is we were out for about 45 days. They set us down next to a helicopter pad. We no more got our packs off, and the dust was just flying from the helicopter. And we no more got our packs off. Here come a sergeant. Looker, Longstreth, Bayham, front and center, bring your ammunition and weapons. And we thought, oh man, we could see a chow hall, and thought, oh man, we're going to get a hot meal. But he put us in the back of a truck. And we got in the back of the truck, and when we got outside the perimeter, first lieutenant got out, Lieutenant Guy. And he got out and he said, gentlemen, I'm going down here to take a bath in this creek down here, and I just want you to protect me. I said, great. And he said, also, there's beer, cold sodas, and some sandwiches back there if you want them. Go ahead and get what you want. And you can even get some of that dust off of your clothes. So we did, came back. 2 days later, we were leaving the base camp, and we were in a rubber tree plantation. And Lieutenant Guy was in between Earl on one side, me on the other side, and then Billy beside Earl. And we got fire from a bunker. For some unknown reason, Lieutenant Guy decided he was going to charge the bunker. And when he got about 3 steps out, he got shot directly in the head and died instantly. And all I could think about, and what keeps coming back, is he wasn't in country a week, maybe 2, and now he's going home to his family in a coffin. And the last one that comes up a lot is March. In March, they moved us down to the Ashall Valley. And you've heard all the rumors about the Ashall Valley. But anyhow, on March the 4th, I got my first Purple Heart, shrapnel on my back. March the 6th, I got my second Purple Heart. March the 9th, for some unknown reason, we were set up in a rice paddy. There was 26 of us in our group, 26 of us in another group, about 2,000 meters apart. And that day, on March the 8th, Earl didn't have enough time left to even get in the helicopter get in a plane and fly home. He was out of the service. So we got a new guy. His name was Alton Ellis. And when you're set up at night, you pull 2 hours guard duty, 4 hours off. Happened to be Alton's turn to pull guard duty. And first night you're in country and you're out there, you're just scared. And Alton happened to see about 4 or 5 North Vietnamese walking down a path close to us. So he shot a few times. Well, that brought everybody else back up on alert. And then we kind of relaxed a little bit about 12:30. And then all hell broke loose. We were surrounded. The first one that was killed was Alton. And then he was between Billy and I. And he was shot in the head and died immediately. There was 4 of them that were actually killed during that first attack. And as I said, we were surrounded. We didn't know how many, but we could see them. Mm-hmm. And we were able to get to a ravine that was off to the side of us, so we could get some more protection other than the rice paddy. And as we got in the ravine, our numbers kept getting smaller and smaller and smaller as we got more wounded and more killed. And about 4 o'clock in the morning, I got shot in the shoulder. I was pretty fortunate because it was a tracer round, so it kind of fused itself. But I was still bleeding. Doc Morgan, who was our medic, came up, gave me a shot of morphine, patched me up as well as he could because there was a lot going on. And I was able to continue fighting for a little while. Not a long time, but a little while. And when I couldn't fight anymore, Billy knew that I was losing blood, a lot of blood. So he took his t-shirt off, put it on my shoulder, and he would put me into the ravine and then sit on my shoulder. Well, it was getting pretty close to 5 o'clock, and again, they couldn't send us any live rounds because we were surrounded. And later on at one of our reunions, we found out from the captain there was about 200 North Vietnamese soldiers and Viet Cong that had us surrounded. And they're coming at us screaming, and all they could send us was illumination rounds, which now you could see them, not only hear them yelling and screaming and coming towards you, but they were only like 25 feet away from you. So I thought for sure we'd never make it out of there alive. Well, about 6 o'clock, when daylight came, the Cobras came in. And when the Cobras came in, they cleared out the area, and we were able to get the medevac helicopters in. I was on the second round because I wasn't wounded as badly as some of them. But that night we lost 11 killed, 7 from my group, 4 from the other group, and 38 of us were wounded out of the total of 52. So anyhow, they loaded me on the helicopter medevac, put me on the top bunk. When they put me on the top bunk, I had my arm hanging down between the actual cot or the stretcher and the wall. And when Billy looked at me, he said to the corpsman, I need you to get that arm up on his chest. Well, the corpsman said, I heard him say, he's going to lose that arm anyhow. So Billy pulled out his .45 and pointed it at him and said, I told you to get his arm on his chest. The next thing I remember after being loaded onto the helicopter was in the field hospital. There was a beautiful young lady, blonde. Her name was Cisco, and I called her Crisco, and she was holding my hand. And before they put me out, I asked her if she's going to be around when I woke up. She said she would. So the next morning when I woke up, there she was, holding my hand. And the next person I saw was Earl. And he came running in there. I can't leave you for one day. And he was on his way home. So I spent time in Guam, and then from Guam, I was transported back to Valley Forge in Pennsylvania. And fortunately, I didn't have to deal with all the protesters at LAX where a lot of them came back to. I've had people tell me that they were spit on, cursed at, and it was really a terrible scene. So most of them came back, took that uniform off because they didn't want to be criticized. And then they carried that burden from Vietnam on their shoulders.
Yeah. John, I hear your story, and I know this is just a short period of time. I know there's just got to be multiple of those same stories in different scenes and different places. One of the things that I hear in your voice, I sense the true, genuine hurt. I can't imagine wondering if you're going to get out of there alive. And you talked about, we weren't sure. We're surrounded by all these Vietnamese, and the voices were louder, and they're just 25 feet from us.
Mm-hmm.
At that moment for you, take us into that time. What thoughts run through your mind? Do you think about your family? Do you think about the people that are closest to you? Are you thinking about, obviously, your brothers that you're at
Right.
war with? Do you mind us asking what those thoughts were?
Well, my first thought was about my family. The next thought was about the group that I was with, if we'd ever make it back to the States alive. And my last, and the one that stayed permanent, is my belief in God. I prayed to God that night, told him I would really like to make it out of here, and I'd like for my companions to make it out alive. And to this day, I also believe that that's the way I got out. And I have a very good friend who lives close to Piqua here, who is actually a prisoner of war in the Hanoi Hilton for 5 years and 3 months.
That's a long time.
A long time. And the last 2 years he was there, he was in a cell next to John McCain. And he wrote a book, and his book is titled Living or Locked Up with God. And he said that's the only way he made it out, was his belief in God and able to get through the torture that he had while he was there.
John, when Trenton talks about PTSD and on all the things that to this day, what are some of the things that you struggle with? And I know you'll talk here a little bit about your treatments and what you started to do, but what are some of the things that you to this day, 2023, still struggle with after all those years? That's over 50 years ago.
Oh yeah, 54. And the thing I struggle with most is when I'm by myself and I don't have something I'm doing. I do a lot of work with veterans, do a lot of things, and if I don't have my mind occupied, something might trigger an incident where we were in a firefight, trigger an incident that might come afterwards. The biggest one that came after I got back from Vietnam was I carried that burden for 35 years. Before I actually went to the Dayton VA and got help from psychologists. like you said, it's been 50 plus years since I was over there. And even today, I still see a psychiatrist once every 3 months. But this Saber Warrior Project, I've currently had 3 good friends of mine who have actually committed suicide. And all 3 of them called me prior to doing it. And there was no way that I could get to them fast enough to maybe talk them out of it. The one, I was 15 minutes from his house. He called me at 10 o'clock in the morning, and I was 15 minutes from his house when his twin sister called me and said he'd committed suicide. And we'd talked for like an hour prior to that. The other one, I was down Tennessee, and he called me and said he couldn't take it any longer. The pain was just too much. The memories were just too much. And I told him I'd be home on Tuesday, and I got a call from our city manager in Mason a day later saying he'd committed suicide. And the third one was one of my high school I graduated with. And he never came back from Vietnam. He spent his entire 50 years still living Vietnam, which you can't do. You have to get that off your shoulders. I carried it for 35 years. Veterans need to tell their stories. I don't care if it's to another veteran, if you get with a psychiatrist, you need to tell your story and get that off of your shoulders.
Trent, I'm going to have you, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm sure there's some things here that are going through your mind that you would like to ask John about his experiences. And, you're talking about your gap of, over 60 years between the two of you, yet there's a common bond here. Trenton, you have anything?
Yeah, so you mentioned that you had 3 friends.
Yes.
Do you feel any sort of guilt or any sort of pressure that it was because, not because of you, but that you had something or you could have done something?
Yes, I do. The first one especially. He was shot up all over and was only receiving 10% compensation for his wound. And I worked with him for 4 years to try and get his compensation back to the point where he needed it. And after 4 years, he was able to get 100% compensation. But all that did was give him more money for alcohol and drugs. And he got hooked on that. He would spend that entire check on alcohol and drugs. And what a shame. He had a great high school career. He was a successful businessman. And like I said before, he was one of those that never came out of Vietnam. He would call me at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd be down in Mason. He lived in Port Jefferson outside of Sydney. And, John, where are you at? Oh, Danny, I'm at home. You can't be. I just told you I was going to fix you a ham sandwich. And, I'm 78 miles away from him. Mm-hmm. So, and he would do that. I had to take him to the VA numerous times because he would get to the point where the alcohol took over and all I could do was scream and holler. So, yeah.
Yeah, so in my eyes, you're obviously a hero.
No.
To me. Who would you say that your brothers that you lost is your hero? Who would you say your hero is?
My hero is Billy Baham. I think Billy Baham saved my life. And when we were at one of our reunions, our medic, Doc Morgan, came. And him and I got off to the side. I was thanking him for pumping me up with morphine, patching me up the best way he could. And he told me, John, you don't know how lucky you were. You had about 15 minutes of blood left, and you'd been gone. So if that helicopter had been 15 more minutes later, I'd have never made it back. And
So-
Billy helped, kept me going by putting pressure on.
And the grace of God with you.
Yes.
Yeah. This event now, fast forward it to here in a couple of weeks, we'll be having an opportunity to celebrate you and celebrate all of our veterans. The game is February 10th. Pick will be hosting Troy at Garbury Gymnasium. Tip off at 7:30. We will be doing we'll have a special, couple special presentations. We'll have some surprises with the national anthem and a check presentation at halftime. We have a video board, so we're going to show a couple videos to honor, but also talk about PTSD. And I think there are a lot of people out there that know what it is, obviously. They know that particularly veterans go through this, but veterans don't talk about it. But we're hoping that people can come out, support it. There's a t-shirt, as Trenton talked about. You'll see that t-shirt here at the end of the show. But we want to thank first of all, outside of our veterans, we want to thank the sponsors for making that shirt happen. Shirts are $15. You can purchase them here at Pickle High School or at Troy High School. You can also purchase them at the board office of Pickle City Schools on Looney Road, 215 Looney Road. You can find order forms online through our social media. The shirt, $15, obviously goes to supporting the Save a Warrior organization, but it also will get you into the game for free when the Indians and the Trojans tangle for the last regular season game here on February 10th. But it also will be a unification. The Troy, Piqua communities will be wearing this t-shirt for you, knowing that you've got communities in the same county coming together. You've talked about the young people like Trenton who are putting this on. It's got to show for you, what is that like? I'm sure it shows a lot of unification, but it's got to be a good feel-good for you and the veterans and just for humanity itself.
Well, this is a great time to do that because we've got all the Iraq and Afghanistan and war on terror veterans coming back. And like me, when I came back, I didn't want to be involved with any of the groups because I had a family to raise, and they do too. But this is going to get out to them. They're going to see that there's help out there, and hopefully they'll come and see someone to take care of all their problems a day. Not all of them. You're not going to cure them all. I'm 54 years later and still have problems. But it's going to give them the opportunity.
And the young veterans in particular, they're coming back, and a lot of them have young families, and they've got to be able to transition, as Trenton talked at the top of the show about transitioning into civilian life. It's difficult. They have issues, and like those triggers that you were talking about, it could be pots and pans banging in the kitchen, and that could trigger something. And families need support. The caretakers need support. And going through therapy. Talk a little bit about your therapy. You started years ago and you continue to go now.
Yeah, I started it's been 25 years ago now. And I started seeing one-on-one because I didn't want to do group, because I didn't want to get involved with other people. I just wanted to do one-on-one. So I did group or individual therapy, and I still do individual therapy, just to get out there and hopefully help me get through. I've got grandkids now. My daughter and my son are in their 50s. Well, my daughter's in her 50s. My son will turn 50 this year. But my grandkids and all those need to know that a veteran is important. If you're walking down the street on Memorial Day and you can tell the veterans in the crowd, they're going to be the ones putting their hand over their heart. And that's very important. I was at something the other day, and it was actually a basketball game. And all the cheerleaders, all the people in the stands, everybody had their hands on me, which was very touching for me.
Well, February 10th, we hope there's going to be a lot of hands-on hearts during the national anthem. And Trenton, real quick, as we wrap the show up,
Yes, sir.
On your end, what's it like? You know, obviously Piqua-Troy is a great rivalry. It's a big rivalry. But what is it like not just be able to have the rivalry that night, but also put the rivalry aside and make this something greater than just ourselves?
Yeah, so like I said at the beginning, when this first started, I hope it's about $4,000 save one life, and you know we're getting close to 4 now, and it's just snowballing. And for two communities to come together that are supposedly hate each other, have a rivalry, but you know when we had a meeting with Troy, and when we walked in that room, you know we knew that we were there for more than just us, and we were there for community and for the people that need help, and it's more selfless than I could ever imagine, and just having you here and when I first met you, you thanked me. I should be thanking you endlessly. Just things like that. So two communities coming together, it's obviously special, and two communities like Piqua and Troy that have a lot of say and a lot of people in them. It's very special.
Yeah, a good deal of influence, certainly between the two schools that can influence in a positive way, and I think certainly that's happening here. So we encourage you, get out and get that t-shirt. It's $15. It'll be a blackout. You can get it at Piqua High School. You can call the Piqua High School. You can call Troy High School. You can also pick them up at Piqua City Schools. If you get on Facebook or any of your social media outlets, Twitter, Instagram, for Piqua City Schools, you can get that t-shirt order form and you can pick it up for $15. Again, the shirt will not only give you the opportunity to give to the Save a Warrior Project, which all proceeds from that shirt goes to Save a Warrior. It'll also get you into the game with all monies going right to Save to Warrior. Not a penny is going anywhere else. All the sponsorships, and we thank all of our sponsors. Our sponsors will be listed here after the show, so you can see them. We thank each and every one of them because we couldn't get this shirt if it wasn't for you. The shirts are paid for. They're now going to go all directly to Save a Warrior, and we thank you for that, our sponsors. You're a popular guy. They're calling you all over the place.
Oh, I know.
John.
Sorry about that.
John, thanks for, no need to be apologizing. John, thank you for taking time out of your busy day to spend with us here at Piqua. Trenton, I've said this to you time and time again. I'll continue to thank you for taking the initiative to do this. And it's nice to see generations coming together for one common cause.
Thank you, Chip, for inviting me. And thank
Thank
you. What a great job.
Thank you.
For our veteran John and our student Trenton, I'm Chip Hare. We hope to see you on February 10th at Piqua High School Garbary Gymnasium for Veterans Night.